All right, AP Human Geography classes. Last video on our unit on language, and we're going to focus on extinct languages and why do people preserve these local languages. Let's get to it. All right, so first, what is an extinct language, right? Well, just like the dinosaurs are, extinct, well, languages become extinct as well. And these are categorized by ones that are no longer spoken or they're spoken by very few people. And I mean few as in 5 or 10 or 2 different people. And these people do not pass their language on to the next generation. Now, the numbers vary on how many extinct languages there are, but the number from Ethnologue comes in at 473. And some examples are Gothic, Macedonian. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So, why do languages become extinct? Well, the 2 biggest reasons is that people convert their languages due to political dominance or cultural preference. For example, Gothic people switch to speaking Latin, and this is due to a number of reasons, and we'll get into them in a second. A very unique case study, reviving an extinct language such as Hebrew. Well, most of the Jewish Bible was written in Hebrew, and thus preserving most of the language. Now, when Israel became an independent country in 1948, they established Hebrew as the official language along with Arabic. Now, a problem was that many words didn't exist in biblical times, and thus they had to create thousands upon thousands of new words for the Hebrew language. Well, credit goes to Elijah ben Yehuda. He was credited for making these thousands of words and really revitalizing the Hebrew language. So, how do people preserve languages? Well, preserving languages or the survival language depends on 2 factors, which we discussed a little bit earlier. It's political strength and military strength in order to keep foreign invaders out. Now, when foreigners come in and conquer a land, well, guess what? They impose their language on the conquered. They're not going to let them keep their language or, create documents in the form of their language. So they're going to impose their own language. One example is the Celtic language declined greatly in the 1300s because, well, guess what? They lost their territory to the invading nomads. There are efforts today to revitalize languages. For example, there's mandatory teaching of languages spoken within schools, and I mean that in high school as well as middle school as well as grade school. Also, TV shows are programmed in certain languages to promote that language as well. And last but not least, we have Sunday schools that are predicated to, let's say, a specific language like Hebrew, like Greek, etc. Now, there are countries around the world that speak 2 different languages or have 2 official languages. Now, often what is not discussed is that there's problems that lead to this, and specifically there are boundary issues. If you look to the map here on the right, where Belgium is, you can see that they are squished between the Netherlands and France. Well, one region speaks French, obviously closer to the French side, and another region speaks Flemish, which is a form of Dutch, closer to the Netherlands side. Now, these boundaries are very finite. They can actually be seen through the following conditions: road signs, through economic conditions, urban development, even political division. Now, there is another case, right? Instead of having official languages where people speak both these languages, well, guess what? We have the opposite, isolated languages. And these are categorized as languages unrelated to any other, which means that they do not belong to any language family. And the reason why is due to physical boundaries, being separated from societies. Now, most languages are tracked and diffused through interaction among people, whereas isolated languages arise from lack of interaction, right? Which makes sense. Now, an example of this would be the language of Basque and the Basque people. They are located in the northern part of Spain and western France. Only about 600,000 people speak this language, and in fact, this language predates Indo-European speakers, which most of the languages in Europe belong to. Now, let's get to something called a lingua franca, which is a language of international communication. One example of this is English. The purpose of a lingua franca is to facilitate trade. What sometimes happens is that there's a mixture of 2 languages between 2 groups in order to communicate with one another. This is also known as a pidgin language, which basically means that one group learns a certain language that can help communicate with another group. These people learn few grammar rules and words just so they can communicate with whatever they have to do. There are other examples of lingua franca. It's not only English, although English is the most dominant and prevalent one. We have some following examples here. We have Swahili in East Africa, Hindi in South Asia, Indonesian in Southeast Asia, Russian in the former Soviet Union. We have Arabic, we have Chinese. There are many other lingua francas. And again, remember that it is a language of communication and a main purpose to facilitate trade or communicate between various groups. All right, let's talk about expansion diffusion of English into other languages. So, why is English increasing around the world? Well, foreign students are learning English as a second language all around the world. Some examples are Denmark, France, Germany, Spain, and Japan. Japan actually made English its second official language due to its importance and global dominance throughout the world. Now, English has spread through expansion diffusion. And what that means is, if you remember, that it's a snowballing effect. And the reason why is because of trade. It is not spread through really people or relocation diffusion. Now, English words have become infused in other languages. You might have heard of some of these. There's Franglaise, Spanglish, and Danglish. Perhaps the one you've probably heard of is Spanglish, right? And if you look at the definition of Spanglish on the right here, it's a form of speech used by Hispanic groups and other people in the United States in which they basically mix Spanish and English together to form sentences, grammar, vocabulary, etc. So English is not only globally dominant, used throughout the world, it is also becoming infused in other languages. Okay. That was it, our last video. We'll discuss extinct languages in class very soon. I will see you then.